Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dominion, his four eyes scanning the tactical display that showed the positions of 10,000 warships. The Galactic Coalition had never assembled such a massive fleet before. Ships from every major species filled the dark void of space, the crystalline vessels of the Cave, the bioorganic cruisers of the Mortak, and the sleek metal destroyers of the Velnari. All united for one purpose: the complete destruction of humanity. Status report, Zethkar commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered dozens of star systems. All fleets are in position, Admiral, replied Commander Ythare, her tentacles dancing across the holographic controls. The human home system lies just beyond the quantum barrier. Our scouts report minimal defensive presence. Zethkar's mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among his species. Of course they show minimal defense. They think their reputation protects them. For 1,000 years, the galaxy had lived in what historians called the Great Peace. No major wars, no system-wide conflicts, just small border disputes and trade disagreements. The humans had arrived during this time, claiming a small corner of the galaxy and keeping mostly to themselves. They traded peacefully, sent diplomats to the Galactic Council, and never caused trouble. But that peaceful facade was exactly why they had to be eliminated. Sir, another officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. Put it through, Zethkar ordered. The main screen flickered, and, suddenly, they were looking at a middle-aged human woman sitting behind a simple wooden desk. She wore no military uniform, no ceremonial armor, just a plain blue suit. Behind her was a window showing a peaceful cityscape with green parks and flowing rivers. Greetings, the human said with a warm smile. I'm President Martinez of the Terran Federation. I understand you wish to speak with us? Zethkar stepped forward, his battle armor gleaming under the bridge lights. Human, I am Admiral Zethkar, Supreme Commander of the Coalition War Fleet. We have come to deliver your species' final judgment. President Martinez tilted her head slightly, as if confused. Final judgment? I'm afraid I don't understand. For too long, your species has hidden behind the mask of peace, Zethkar snarled. You pretend to be harmless traitors and diplomats, but we know the truth. We know what you really are. And what are we, Admiral? Zethkar's four eyes blazed with ancient hatred. You are the descendants of the Terran Empire. You are the children of the species that conquered half the galaxy before the Great Peace began. You are warriors pretending to be merchants. President Martinez was quiet for a moment, then, she started to laugh. It began as a soft chuckle but ruined a full-blown laughter that echoed across the bridge. Other humans could be heard laughing in the background. You're declaring war on us, she said between giggles, because you think we're pretending to be peaceful? Zethkar's claws extended in anger. Mock us if you wish, human. Your laughter will turn to screams when our fleets glass your worlds. Oh, Admiral, President Martinez wiped a tear from her eye, you have it completely backwards. Explain. We're not warriors pretending to be peaceful. We're peaceful people who happen to be very, very good at war when we need to be. The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in silence. Commander Ythare looked at her instruments with confusion. Sir, I'm detecting massive energy signatures coming from the human system. Impossible. Our scouts reported only civilian traffic and a few patrol ships. Sir, you need to see this. The tactical display updated, and Zethkar felt his blood freeze. Where moments before the scanners had shown empty space, now thousands of human ships materialized. Not the small trading vessels they had observed for centuries, but massive warships bristling with weapons technology the Coalition had never seen before. Stealth technology, Ythare whispered. They were there the entire time. More ships kept appearing. Space stations uncloaked around every planet. Orbital platforms revealed themselves in the asteroid belts. What had seemed like a peaceful star system was actually a fortress that had been hiding in plain sight. How many ships? Zethkar demanded. Still counting, sir. At least 20,000. Maybe more. Zethkar stared at the display in disbelief. That's impossible. We've been monitoring their production for centuries. They don't have the industrial capacity to build such a fleet. Sir, the communications officer called out, we're receiving another transmission. This time it was a different human, an older man wearing what looked like a casual shirt. He was sitting in what appeared to be a garden, with flowers blooming behind him. "Hello there," the man said cheerfully. "I'm Admiral Johnson, but my friends call me Bob. I hear you folks want to have a war?" Sethkar found his voice. "Where did those ships come from?" "Oh, these old things?" Bob gestured vaguely. "We've been building them for about 800 years. You know, just in case." 800 years? Our intelligence shows your industrial output. You couldn't possibly build 25,000 warships without anyone noticing? Bob grinned. You'd be surprised what you can accomplish when you put your mind to it. And when you have a really good reason to stay quiet about it. What reason? Well, see, the thing is, Bob leaned back in his chair, we learned something important a long time ago. If you want peace, you have to be ready for war. But, if you look ready for war, people assume you want war. So the trick is to be ready for war while looking like you want peace. Zethkar's tactical mind was reeling. You've been planning this for centuries. Planning for this, Admiral. Not planning this. There's a difference. We hoped it would never happen. We really did enjoy the peace. On the tactical display, more human ships were moving into position. They moved with precision that spoke of countless hours of training and preparation. Your fleet is impressive, Zethkar admitted grudgingly. But, you're still outnumbered. We have 10,000 ships. Actually, you have 9,743 ships, Bob corrected. We've been counting. And, you're right, that is more ships than we have. But, here's the thing about warfare that you might have forgotten during your 1,000 years of peace. Which is? It's not about how many ships you have. It's about how good your ships are, how well trained your crews are, and how much you really want to win. As if to demonstrate his point, the human fleet began moving. They didn't charge forward in a massive assault. Instead, they flowed through space like water, each ship moving in perfect coordination with every other ship. It was like watching a dance performed by 25,000 dancers who had been practicing together for centuries. Impossible, Commander Yithare breathed. The coordination required for such maneuvers. Sir, another officer reported, our scanners are detecting some kind of quantum communication network linking all their ships. Response time is essentially instantaneous. Zethkar watched the human fleet deploy into formations he had only read about in ancient military texts. How long have you been preparing for this? Like I said, about 800 years, Bob replied. Give or take a decade. You see, we figured out pretty early that this peace thing was too good to last. Someone was eventually going to decide that humans were a threat that needed to be eliminated. We just didn't know who or when. So you built a secret fleet. We built several secret fleets, actually. This is just the Home Defense Force. Zethkar felt something cold settle in his stomach. Several fleets? Oh yes. There's one in the Andromeda system, one in the Centauri cluster, one in the Vega region. We figured if someone was going to try to wipe us out, we should probably have some backup plans. The Coalition Admiral looked at his tactical display with new understanding. The human ships weren't just numerous, they were technologically advanced beyond anything the Coalition had. Their hulls seemed to bend light around them, their weapons charged with energy signatures that made his own fleet's armaments look primitive. What do you want? Zethkar asked finally. Want? We want you to go home, Admiral. We want you to tell the Galactic Coalition that humanity is still committed to peace. We want to keep trading with your people, sharing technology, exploring the galaxy together. And, if we refuse? Bob's cheerful expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Then, we'll defend ourselves. And, Admiral, we've gotten very, very good at defending ourselves. The communication screen split, showing views from several different human ships. Each one revealed crews working with calm efficiency, preparing weapon systems and defensive measures. These weren't panicked civilians trying to figure out how to operate military equipment. These were professional soldiers who had trained for this moment their entire lives. You see, Bob continued, while your species were enjoying peace, we were studying war. Every battle ever fought, every strategy ever devised, every weapon ever created. We became students of conflict while praying we'd never have to graduate. Zethkar turned to his tactical officer. Analysis of their weapons? Unknown energy signatures, sir. Our computers can't identify the technology. But, the power readings are significant. How significant? Each of their main battle cruisers appears to carry more firepower than one of our dreadnoughts. On the screen, Bob was talking to someone off camera. Yes, Admiral Martinez wants to know if they're ready to discuss terms. What? Oh, they haven't agreed to talk yet. He turned back to the camera. Sorry about that. We're still hoping for a peaceful resolution. Terms? Zethkar demanded. You speak as if you've already won. Haven't we? Bob asked mildly. Let's see. You have about 10,000 ships crewed by species who have known peace for 1,000 years. We have 25,000 ships crewed by people who have been training for war for 8 centuries. Your weapons are based on 1,000-year-old technology. Our weapons are based on technologies we've been developing specifically for fighting species like yours. He paused to let that sink in. Your crews are brave, Admiral, but they're not warriors. Our crews are both. Zethkar looked around his bridge at his officers. They were the finest military minds the Coalition had produced, veterans of the small conflicts that had broken out during the peace. But, he could see in their faces the same realization that was dawning on him. They had brought knives to a gunfight. Why, he asked finally. Why prepare for war if you truly wanted peace? Because peace isn't free, Admiral. It never has been. Peace exists only when good people are strong enough to defend it from those who would destroy it. The tactical display updated again. Human ships were taking positions that would allow them to engage the Coalition fleet from multiple angles simultaneously. But, they weren't attacking. They were waiting. You could destroy us right now, Zethkar observed. Yes, we could. But, that would make us no different from you, wouldn't it? You came here to commit genocide. We're here to prevent it. The Coalition will never accept this. Even if you defeat us, more fleets will come. Bob nodded sadly. Probably. And, we'll defeat them too, if we have to. Because that's what we do, Admiral. We protect our home, our families, our way of life. We'll do it as gently as we can, but we'll do it. And, if the entire galaxy united against you? Then, the galaxy would lose. The simple confidence in those words was somehow more terrifying than any threat could have been. Zethkar made his decision. What are your terms? Your unconditional surrender, the immediate withdrawal of all Coalition forces from this system, and a formal apology to the Galactic Council for initiating an unprovoked war. And, in return? You get to go home alive. Your crews get to see their families again. The Coalition gets to learn that humanity really does prefer peace, but only when that peace is offered with respect. Zethkar considered his options. He could order an attack, but the tactical situation was hopeless. His fleet would be destroyed, and other Coalition fleets would follow. Eventually, these humans would decide that defense wasn't enough and would take the war to Coalition space. Or he could surrender and deal with the political consequences later. I need to consult with the Coalition Council, he said finally. Of course. Take your time. We're not going anywhere. The transmission ended, leaving the Coalition fleet alone with their thoughts and fears. The emergency session of the Galactic Coalition Council convened within hours of Admiral Zethkar's initial report. Representatives from 43 species gathered in the massive crystal dome that served as the council chambers on the neutral world of Kepler Prime. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime as dozens of different languages filled the space with urgent chatter. Council Prime Veltar, the ancient leader of the crystalline Kaith, called the session to order with a resonant tone that echoed through the chamber. We have received Admiral Zethkar's preliminary report. The situation at the human homeworld is unexpected. Unexpected, roared General Morgoth of the Crothery Empire, his massive form towering over the other delegates. Our greatest military force has been humiliated by a species we dismissed as merchants and farmers. Ambassador Sithare of the Velnari Consortium hissed in agreement. For centuries we have monitored their industrial output, their military expenditures, their technological development. Nothing suggested they possessed such capabilities. Perhaps, suggested Dr. Yilneth of the Peaceful Etherian Collective, we should ask ourselves how we made such a fundamental error in judgment. The question hung in the air like an accusation. Council Prime Veltar activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. It showed real-time feeds from the Coalition fleet, still holding position at the edge of the human solar system. The human ships maintained their formations with mechanical precision, neither advancing nor retreating. Admiral Zethkar, Veltar's voice carried across space through quantum communication, report on the current situation. Zethkar's image appeared in the chamber, his four eyes showing the strain of the past several hours. Council Prime, the humans have made their position clear. They demand unconditional surrender, immediate withdrawal, and a formal apology. Unacceptable. General Morgoth slammed his fist against his console. The Crothery Empire does not surrender to inferior species. With respect, General, Zethkar replied, there is nothing inferior about what we face here. Our tactical analysis suggests that a direct confrontation would result in the complete destruction of our fleet. Surely you exaggerate, protested Ambassador Sithare. No single species could pose such a threat to the combined might of the Coalition. Ambassador, I am transmitting detailed scans of their vessels. Perhaps you would care to review them. The holographic display shifted to show technical readouts from the human ships. The assembled delegates fell silent as they absorbed the information. These power signatures, whispered Dr. Yilnef, they're beyond our theoretical maximums. The hull composition is unknown, added Chief Engineer Theklan of the Mechanical Union. Our sensors cannot penetrate their armor. And their weapons, Zethkar continued grimly, utilize energy forms we cannot identify. Each of their battleships carries more destructive potential than one of our dreadnoughts. General Morgoth's breathing grew heavy, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. How is this possible? We have monitored their development for 800 years. Apparently, Ambassador Sithare said slowly, we have been monitoring a facade. Council Prime Veltar processed this information with the patient calculations of his ancient species. Admiral, what is your professional assessment of their claims? Do they indeed possess multiple fleets as their Admiral Johnson suggested? Council Prime, our deep space monitoring stations have detected quantum signatures consistent with large fleet movements in at least 6 other star systems. All in regions we had previously classified as uninhabited or lightly colonized by humans. The chamber erupted in alarm. Species that had maintained dignity for centuries began shouting over one another in fear and rage. Silence. Veltar's harmonic tone cut through the chaos. We will proceed with order, as befits a civilized council. When quiet returned, Dr. Yilnef raised a tentacle. Perhaps we should ask ourselves a more fundamental question. Why now? If the humans have possessed such capabilities for centuries, why have they remained peaceful? Because they were planning this. General Morgoth declared. Building their strength, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But they didn't strike, pointed out Ambassador Kethril of the Trading Federation. We struck first. They were content with the status quo until we threatened them. The Etherian raises a valid point, agreed Veltar. In 800 years of contact, humanity has never initiated aggression against any coalition member. They have honored all treaties, fulfilled all trade agreements, and contributed positively to galactic stability. A deception. Morgoth insisted. Or, Dr. Yilnef said quietly, the truth. The chamber fell silent again as the implications sank in. Admiral Zethkar, Veltar continued, during your interactions with the humans, what was your assessment of their intentions? Council Prime, they appeared genuinely committed to avoiding bloodshed. They could have destroyed our fleet before we were even aware of their presence, but they chose to reveal themselves and negotiate instead. The human Admiral Johnson, added Commander Yithare, whose image appeared beside Zethkar's, displayed no enthusiasm for warfare. He seemed disappointed that it had come to this. Ambassador Sithare's serpentine form coiled in thought. Perhaps we have misunderstood their nature entirely. What do you mean? Asked General Morgoth. We assumed that peace made them weak. But what if peace made them strong? Dr. Yilnef nodded thoughtfully. The Etherian archives contain references to species that grew powerful through harmony rather than conflict. Perhaps humanity represents such an evolutionary path. Impossible, Morgoth scoffed. Power comes from strength, and strength comes from conquest. Does it? Challenged Ambassador Kethril. The The humans have achieved interstellar civilization, advanced technology, and, apparently unmatched military capability, all while maintaining internal peace and external cooperation. Perhaps there are other paths to power. Council Prime Veltar considered this. Admiral, request permission to speak with human leadership directly. Zethkar nodded and activated his communication system. Within moments, the cheerful face of Admiral Bob Johnson appeared in the council chambers. "Well, hello there," Bob said with a smile that seemed genuine despite the circumstances. "Council Prime Veltar, isn't it? I've heard good things about your leadership during the Kepler Accords." Veltar's crystals shifted in surprise. Few species outside the Kaith remembered those negotiations from 3 centuries ago. "You are familiar with coalition history, Admiral?" "Oh yes. We've been studying galactic politics quite extensively. You folks have accomplished some remarkable things during the peace. The unified trade standards alone prevented dozens of potential conflicts. Yet you prepared for war." Bob's expression grew sad. "Not for war, Council Prime. For defense. There's a difference, though I understand it might not seem that way from your perspective." "Explain this difference." "War is about conquest, domination, the imposition of will upon others. Defense is about protection, preservation, the right to exist as we choose. We have never desired to conquer anyone. We simply refuse to be conquered." General Morgoth pushed forward. "Your fleet could conquer half the galaxy." "Could, yes. Will, no. Would, never." Bob's voice carried absolute conviction. "General, we have studied the histories of every species in the coalition. We know the price of empire. We want no part of it." "Then, why build such weapons?" "Because sometimes good intentions aren't enough. Sometimes peaceful people need to be strong enough to defend themselves from those who aren't peaceful." Dr. Yilnath leaned forward. "Admiral Johnson, may I ask a personal question?" "Of course." "What do you want?" "Not politically, not strategically, but personally. What does Bob Johnson want from this situation?" Bob was quiet for a moment. "I want to go home to my garden. I want to call my grandchildren and ask about their school projects. I want to argue with my neighbor about whose roses are better this year. I want to live in a universe where my species can exist without fear." The simplicity of his answer somehow carried more weight than any political manifesto. "And, if we guarantee that?" Veltar asked. "If the coalition formally recognizes human sovereignty and pledges non-interference? Then, this fleet goes back to being invisible, and Bob Johnson goes back to being a retired admiral who grows prize-winning tomatoes." Ambassador Sithare spoke up. "Your technology could benefit the entire galaxy. Would humanity be willing to share it?" "Some of it, sure. Medical advances, agricultural improvements, clean energy systems, we've always been happy to trade technology that improves life. The weapons technology, though." Bob shook his head. "That stays with us." "Why?" "Because weapons technology shared is weapons technology that can be turned against you. We learned that lesson a long time ago." General Morgoth's breathing had calmed, and, when he spoke, his voice held a grudging respect. "You are warriors, then? Despite your protestations of peace?" "No, General. We are gardeners who are very, very good with tools. That is a distinction without a difference." Bob smiled. "There's all the difference in the world. A warrior seeks conflict. A gardener seeks growth, but knows that sometimes you have to prune the diseased branches to save the tree." The metaphor was not lost on the assembled delegates. Council Prime Veltar consulted with his fellow council members through rapid harmonic exchanges that took only minutes but conveyed complex negotiations. "Admiral Johnson," Veltar said finally, "the coalition requires time to consider this situation." "Of course. We're not going anywhere. And, if we were to agree to your terms? Then, we forget this ever happened. Your fleet returns home with honor intact. We'll make sure the records show this was a planned military exercise that ended successfully. No one needs to lose face." General Morgoth looked surprised. "You would allow us to maintain dignity?" "General, dignity is about the only thing we can't give back once it's lost. We have no interest in humiliating the coalition. We just want to be left alone." The transmission ended, leaving the council to debate. "This is unprecedented," Ambassador Kethril said. "A species with the power to dominate offering to remain hidden." "It changes everything," agreed Dr. Yilneth. "If humanity is truly committed to peace despite their military superiority, perhaps the galaxy is safer than we thought. Or," General Morgoth said grimly, "perhaps it is in more danger." "A species that can hide such power so completely, what else might they be hiding?" Council Prime Veltar's crystals pulsed with deep thought. "Perhaps that is the wrong question, General. Perhaps we should ask, what else might other species be hiding?" The uncomfortable silence that followed suggested that question had occurred to more than one delegate. "We have a choice," Veltar continued. "We can accept humanity's terms and return to the peace that has benefited all our species. Or we can continue this conflict and face the consequences." "What consequences?" Morgoth demanded. Admiral Johnson was quite clear. "They will defend themselves. And, given what we have seen of their capabilities, I believe such defense would be thorough." The vote, when it came, was closer than anyone had expected. But, in the end, survival instincts overcame pride. The coalition would accept humanity's terms. The formal surrender ceremony took place in neutral space, halfway between the coalition fleet and the human defensive line. A single coalition diplomatic vessel approached the designated coordinates, escorted by 2 human ships that moved with the same fluid precision that had characterized their entire fleet. Admiral Zethkar sat in his dress uniform, medals from past victories weighing heavily on his chest. Across from him, Admiral Bob Johnson wore simple civilian clothes, khakis and a polo shirt that looked like they had come from a weekend barbecue. The contrast was jarring and, somehow made the human more intimidating, not less. "I want you to know," Zethkar said as their ships aligned, "this was not personal. The coalition genuinely believed humanity posed a threat." Bob nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. Fear makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. We've been there ourselves." "Have you?" "When?" "Long time ago. Back when we were still learning how to be human instead of just clever animals." The docking sequence completed with mechanical precision. As Zethkar crossed into the human vessel, he was struck by how normal everything looked. The corridors could have belonged to any civilian transport. There were no weapons mounted on the walls, no battle honors displayed, no intimidating security personnel. Instead, he saw crew members who nodded politely as they passed, their conversations focused on routine maintenance tasks and shift schedules. It was only when he looked closer that he noticed details, the way they moved with unconscious awareness of their surroundings, how their casual postures could shift to combat readiness in an instant, the subtle modifications to their clothing that suggested built-in protection. These were not soldiers pretending to be civilians. They were civilians who happened to be perfectly trained soldiers. "Welcome aboard the garden variety," Bob said as they entered a conference room that looked more like a family dining room than a military facility. "Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Tea? We've got some excellent Centauri fruit juice if you prefer." Zethkar settled into a chair that adjusted automatically to accommodate his physiology. "The name of your ship, is that a joke?" "Not really. Most of our ships have names like that. Sunday Drive, Neighborhood Watch, Family Reunion. Keeps things in perspective." "Perspective? Reminds us what we're really fighting for. Not glory or conquest, but the right to have ordinary lives with ordinary names doing ordinary things." A young human woman entered carrying a tray of refreshments. She moved with the same unconscious grace as the rest of the crew, and Zethkar realized she was probably as dangerous as any special forces operative in the coalition military. "This is Lieutenant Sarah Chen," Bob said. "She'll be handling the technical details of the withdrawal." "Technical details?" Sarah smiled with the patience of someone explaining something to a child. "Escort protocols for your fleet, safe passage corridors, verification procedures to ensure no misunderstandings. We want to make sure everyone gets home safely." "You are concerned for our safety?" "Of course. Admiral Zethkar, we're not your enemies. We never were. This whole situation is just an unfortunate misunderstanding." Zethkar studied the young woman's face, looking for deception and finding none. "You would escort 10,000 ships that came here to destroy you?" "Yes, sir. All the way to the edge of our space, with full honor guards and safe passage guarantees." It was Bob who answered the question Zethkar couldn't bring himself to ask. Because that's who we are, Admiral. We don't leave people in danger, even people who came here meaning to hurt us. The formal documents were surprisingly straightforward. The coalition acknowledged that they had initiated an unprovoked attack. Humanity accepted their withdrawal and agreed to consider the matter closed. Both sides committed to future peaceful relations. That's it? Zethkar asked, staring at the simple text. What were you expecting? Demands for tribute. Territory concessions. Technology transfers. Bob looked genuinely puzzled. Why would we want any of that? Because you won. We didn't win anything, Admiral. We just didn't lose. There's a difference. Sarah activated a holographic display showing the withdrawal route. Your fleet will exit through Corridor 7. We'll provide navigation assistance and emergency support if needed. Estimated travel time to the Coalition border is 18 hours. You have plotted the most efficient route, Zethkar observed with surprise. Of course. The sooner you're safely home, the sooner we can all get back to normal life. As they finalized the details, Zethkar found himself asking the question that had been bothering him since this all began. Why reveal yourselves at all? You could have remained hidden, let us enter your system, then destroyed us without warning. It would have been tactically superior. Bob was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, have you ever been to Earth? No. There's a place there called Arlington Cemetery. Rows and rows of white stones marking the graves of soldiers who died in wars. Hundreds of thousands of them. Each stone represents someone who never came home to their family. Sarah nodded. My great-grandfather is buried there. He died in the water wars of 2157. The thing about those stones, Bob continued, is that they don't just represent the dead. They represent everyone who loved them. Parents who lost children. Spouses who lost partners. Children who grew up without mothers or fathers. I don't understand the relevance. Every ship in your fleet contains people like that. People with families, with lives, with things they want to go home to. We couldn't just murder them, even if it would have been easier. Zethkar felt something shift in his understanding. You see us as people, not just enemies. Admiral, we stopped having enemies a long time ago. We have problems to solve, threats to address, situations to manage. But, enemies? That's too personal. Too full of hate. Yet you built weapons capable of destroying entire fleets. Sarah leaned forward. Because sometimes the only way to protect people is to be strong enough that no one wants to fight you in the first place. But, you were prepared to fight if necessary. Oh yes, Bob said quietly. If you had pressed the attack, we would have defended ourselves. And it would have been swift and decisive and absolutely final. Without anger? Without anger. Without hatred. Without anything except determination to protect our homes. The transmission came through as they were completing the paperwork. It was from Admiral Johnson's ship to the Coalition fleet, broadcast on all frequencies. Coalition vessels, this is Admiral Johnson. Your diplomatic team has successfully negotiated safe passage for your fleet. We will be escorting you to the border to ensure your safe return home. Please maintain current formations and follow the navigation beacons we're transmitting. Zethkar watched the tactical display as human ships moved to surround his fleet in perfect escort formation. Not the encirclement of a captured enemy, but the protective barrier of an honor guard. We came here to destroy you, he said, still trying to process what was happening. Yes, you did. And now we're making sure you get home safely. Both things can be true. This is not how warfare is supposed to work. Sarah smiled. Maybe that's the problem with warfare. Maybe it's time to try something different. As the massive combined fleet began moving toward the edge of human space, Zethkar found himself experiencing something he hadn't felt in decades, genuine respect for an enemy. Except they weren't enemies anymore. He wasn't sure what they were. Admiral Johnson, he said as they prepared to transfer back to his ship, may I ask you something personal? Sure. What will you do when this is over? Go home. Tend my garden. Maybe teach my granddaughter how to fish. What about you? I I'm not sure. I've been a soldier all my life. Well, maybe it's time to try being something else. The galaxy's big enough for all of us to find our place in it. The escort proceeded without incident. Human ships maintained perfect defensive formations around the Coalition fleet, their crews professional and courteous in all communications. They provided navigation assistance, technical support when requested, and even medical aid when a Velnari crewman suffered an allergic reaction to something in the ship's recycled air. As they approached the border, Zethkar realized that his entire understanding of power had been turned upside down. He had always believed that strength meant the ability to dominate others. But these humans had demonstrated something different, the strength to choose mercy when you had the power to destroy. Coalition fleet, Bob's voice came over the communication system one final time. You are now crossing into Coalition space. Safe travels, and thank you for keeping this civil. The Terran Federation looks forward to continued peaceful relations with all Coalition members. Zethkar looked back at the human ships, which had already begun their journey home. They moved with the same fluid precision they had shown throughout the encounter, but now he understood what he was seeing. It wasn't just military discipline. It was something deeper. It was the confidence of a people who knew exactly who they were and what they stood for. Admiral, 3 months after the failed invasion, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy new normal. The official story, as agreed upon, was that the Coalition had conducted a massive military exercise that concluded successfully. But rumors spread through trading posts and diplomatic channels like wildfire. Everyone knew something significant had happened, even if the details remained classified. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at the observation deck of the research station New Horizon, watching the stars will slowly pass the viewport. As humanity's chief xenobiologist and the architect of their peaceful contact protocols, she had spent decades studying alien cultures. Now she was preparing for the most important diplomatic mission of her career. The Council has agreed to a formal summit, announced Captain David Park as he entered the observation lounge. Representatives from all major Coalition species will attend. Elena turned from the viewport. All of them? Even the Crothery. General Morgoth himself will be there. That's unexpected. I thought he was calling for renewed hostilities. David shook his head. Apparently Admiral Zethkar's report changed a lot of minds. The general consensus seems to be that the Coalition needs to understand humanity better before making any more assumptions. Elena activated her personal tablet and reviewed her notes. 4 months, she had been preparing cultural briefings and diplomatic strategies. But this summit would be different from any previous diplomatic contact. This time, humanity would be negotiating from a position of acknowledged strength. Any word from Admiral Johnson? He sends his regards and says he's glad he can go back to arguing with his neighbor about tomato varieties. Despite everything, Elena smiled. Bob Johnson's determination to remain a civilian at heart had become something of a legend among both human and Coalition personnel. Several Coalition officers had reportedly requested advice on retirement planning. The diplomatic vessel Olive Branch departed Earth 3 days later, carrying a delegation that represented humanity's commitment to peaceful relations. Unlike the massive warships that had shocked the galaxy, this ship was clearly designed for diplomacy. Its hull gleamed white and gold, and its configuration emphasized communication arrays and conference facilities rather than weapons systems. Elena stood on the bridge as they approached the meeting site, a neutral space station in the Kepler system that had been expanded specifically for this summit. Through the viewports, she could see dozens of Coalition ships already in position. They're taking no chances, observed Commander Lisa Chang, the ship's captain. Full military escort for every delegation. Can you blame them? 3 months ago they thought they understood the balance of power in the galaxy. Now they're not sure of anything. The docking procedures went smoothly, with both human and Coalition personnel maintaining scrupulous politeness. Elena noted the subtle changes in how Coalition officers interacted with the human delegation. There was a new wariness, but also something that might have been respect. The main conference chamber was an architectural marvel, designed to accommodate the environmental needs of dozens of different species. Elena took her seat at the circular table, noting how the seating arrangement had been carefully planned to avoid any suggestion of hierarchy or dominance. Council Prime Veltar called the session to order with his characteristic harmonic tones. We gather today to address the new realities that have emerged in our galaxy. The recent events have shown that our understanding of interspecies relations requires significant revision. General Morgoth was the first to speak, his massive form imposing even when seated.
Let us speak plainly. Humanity has revealed military capabilities that dwarf our own. The question before us is simple: what are your intentions?
Elena stood to respond, choosing her words carefully. General Morgoth, honored delegates, humanity's intentions have not changed. We seek peaceful coexistence, mutual prosperity, and the continued advancement of galactic civilization. With respect, Dr. Vasquez, interjected Ambassador Sithare of the Velnari, your species concealed its true capabilities for centuries.
How can we trust such protestations of peaceful intent?
Because, Elena replied calmly, our actions have consistently matched our words. In 800 years of contact, humanity has never initiated aggression, never broken a treaty, never failed to honor its commitments. Our military capabilities were developed for defense, not conquest. Yet you built enough ships to challenge the entire galaxy, pointed out Dr. Yilneth of the Etherian Collective.
Elena activated a holographic display showing human space.
Dr. Yilneth, may I share some context that has not been previously disclosed? The assembled delegates leaned forward with interest.
When humanity first achieved interstellar travel, we encountered evidence of previous civilizations.
Dead worlds, ruined cities, entire star systems stripped bare. We realized that the galaxy had seen periods of devastating warfare in the past. The display shifted to show archaeological sites and sensor data from abandoned worlds. We found records indicating that approximately every 1,000 years, the galaxy experiences a period of massive conflict. Species rise to dominance, expand aggressively, then either destroy each other or exhaust themselves.
The current millennium of peace is an anomaly, not the norm.
Uncomfortable murmurs rippled through the chamber.
So we prepared, Elena continued.
Not for conquest, but for the possibility that the cycle might repeat itself.
We hoped it wouldn't. We worked to prevent it.
But we refused to be unprepared if it happened anyway. Council Prime Veltar's crystals pulsed with deep thought. You are suggesting that your military preparations were based on historical precedent rather than aggressive intent.
Exactly.
We studied the patterns of galactic history and prepared for the worst-case scenario while working toward the best-case outcome.
And the best-case outcome is, asked Ambassador Kethril of the Trading Federation. Exactly what we have now.
Multiple species cooperating peacefully, sharing knowledge and resources, exploring the galaxy together. The only difference is that now everyone knows that peace is protected by strength rather than maintained by luck. General Morgoth shifted in his seat.
You speak of protection, but from whom? If your species is the strongest military force in the galaxy, who threatens this peace? Elena's expression grew serious. General, the galaxy is vast.
Our exploration vessels have detected signs of activity in distant regions, beyond the reach of current coalition space.
Not all species may share our commitment to peaceful coexistence.
The implications of this statement sent a chill through the chamber.
Unknown species, whispered Dr. Yilneth.
Unknown and potentially hostile.
Our long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures and artificial structures at the galaxy's edge.
We don't know who or what is out there, but we believe contact is inevitable within the next few centuries. General Morgotha's breathing had grown heavy again.
And humanity prepares to face these unknown threats alone?
We prepare to face them if necessary. But we would prefer to face them together. Elena activated another display, this one showing strategic projections and defensive plans. Honored delegates, humanity proposes the formation of a galactic defense alliance. Not to impose human dominance, but to ensure that our collective civilization can defend itself against external threats while maintaining internal peace. The chamber erupted in discussion as species representatives conferred among themselves. The concept was radical, a unified military command that would transcend individual species loyalties.
Ambassador Sithare raised a concern. Dr. Vasquez, such an alliance would require unprecedented cooperation and trust. How do we know humanity would not use such a position to dominate the galaxy? Because we've already demonstrated our restraint. We had the power to dominate, and we chose not to. We could have conquered the coalition fleet, and we chose to escort it safely home. Power reveals character, Ambassador. Our character has been revealed. Dr. Yil_Neth leaned forward. What would humanity require in return for this protection? Nothing that we don't already have.
Continued trade relationships, technological exchange in non-military fields, and the assurance that coalition species will contribute to collective defense according to their abilities.
You ask for no tribute? No territorial concessions?
General Morgoth seemed genuinely puzzled. General, we already control the territory we want, our own worlds. We already have access to the resources we need through trade.
What more could we gain through conquest that we couldn't achieve through cooperation?
Commander Chang, who had been quietly observing the proceedings, stood to add her perspective. If I may, honored delegates, I'd like to share something personal. Veltar gestured for her to continue. My grandmother fought in the last major conflict before the Great Peace. She used to tell me that the worst thing about war wasn't the dying, it was the living afterward. The guilt, the nightmares, the knowledge that you had destroyed someone else's family. She said that victory in war was just another word for survival, and survival wasn't worth much if you lost your soul in the process. The chamber was silent as her words sank in.
Humanity learned long ago that conquest is a hollow victory.
We prefer to build rather than destroy, to grow rather than take, to protect rather than dominate.
That's not weakness, it's wisdom. The debate continued for hours, but Elena could sense the tide turning.
The coalition representatives were beginning to understand that humanity's offer was genuine. More importantly, they were beginning to grasp the implications of the external threats Elena had revealed.
As the session concluded, General Morgoth approached Elena privately. Dr. Vasquez, I must ask, are these external threats real, or simply a convenient way to justify humanity's military supremacy? Elena met his gaze steadily.
General, I wish they were merely convenient fiction.
But our deep space monitoring stations don't lie.
Something large and potentially hostile is moving in distant space.
We estimate first contact within 200 years. And you believe the coalition cannot face such threats alone?
I believe the coalition has spent 1,000 years becoming very good at peace and very bad at war. That's admirable, but it may not be sufficient for what's coming.
Morgoth nodded slowly.
Perhaps it is time for old soldiers to learn new ways of thinking about strength.
Perhaps, General.
Or perhaps it's time for old soldiers to teach younger species that strength without wisdom is merely destruction. The summit continued for 3 more days, with detailed discussions about command structure, resource allocation, and strategic planning. By the end, the framework for the Galactic Defense Alliance had been established, with humanity serving as the primary military coordinator while each species retained autonomy over their internal affairs.
Elena stood again at an observation deck, this time watching coalition ships preparing to depart.
The universe felt different now, not safer, exactly, but more honest. The pretense had been stripped away, revealing both the threats and the protections that had always existed.
Thinking about the future?
Captain Chang asked as she joined Elena at the viewport.
Thinking about choices.
For centuries, we chose to hide our strength to preserve peace.
Now we're choosing to reveal our strength to preserve peace. I wonder if we made the right decision.
History will judge that, I suppose.
But I think we've given the galaxy the best chance we could. Elena nodded, watching the stars wheel past.
Somewhere in that vast darkness, unknown forces were stirring. But, for the first time in galactic history, the civilized species would face those forces united.
It wouldn't be easy. But it would be honest.
And, sometimes, Elena reflected, honesty was the strongest foundation for peace. 5 years had passed since the formation of the Galactic Defense Alliance, and the galaxy had transformed in ways no one could have predicted.
Admiral Sarah Chen, formerly Lieutenant Chun from that first encounter with Admiral Zethkar, now commanded the Integrated Defense Station Unity's shield at the edge of Coalition space.
The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built using technologies from 17 different species under human coordination.
Crystalline Kaith communication arrays interfaced seamlessly with Velnari sensor networks and Crothery defensive systems. It was proof that the Alliance was more than just a military necessity, it was becoming a new model for galactic civilization.
Admiral, called out Lieutenant Commander Theklan, the mechanical union officer who served as the station's chief engineer, were receiving priority signals from Deep Space Monitoring Post Omega-7. Sarah moved to the main display, where data streams from the galaxy's edge painted an ominous picture.
What are we looking at, Commander? Multiple contact signatures, Admiral.
Large formations moving at significant fractions of light speed. They're still beyond our detailed sensor range, but the energy signatures are massive.
Sarah felt her stomach tighten.
For 5 years, the Alliance had prepared for this moment, but seeing it arrive was still a shock.
How long until they reach Coalition space? At current velocity, approximately 18 months, Admiral. Signal all Alliance commanders.
Initiate Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was the Alliance's formal first contact and threat assessment procedure. Within hours, representatives from every member species would converge on Unity's shield to evaluate the situation and coordinate their response. The first to arrive was Admiral Zethkar, whose transformation over the past 5 years had been remarkable. The former Coalition military commander had become one of humanity's strongest advocates, earning respect across species lines for his wisdom and tactical expertise. Admiral Chen, he said as he materialized on the holographic conference table, I take it our long-anticipated visitors have finally decided to make their presence known.
It appears so, Admiral.
We're still gathering data, but initial readings suggest a fleet of significant size and technological sophistication.
More holographic figures appeared around the table as other Alliance commanders checked in.
General Morgoth had aged considerably in recent years, but his mind remained sharp. Dr. Yilnath represented the scientific community's interests, while Admiral Bob Johnson attended from his retirement home on Earth, his presence a reminder of humanity's continued commitment to peaceful solutions. Let me see what we're dealing with, Bob said, settling into his chair with the same casual demeanor that had once confused Zethkar. The display updated with the latest sensor data.
Hundreds of contacts moved in perfect formation across the void, their ships unlike anything in the Alliance database.
The vessels appeared to be constructed from some kind of dark matter that absorbed rather than reflected energy, making detailed scans difficult. Energy signatures suggest weapons technology significantly more advanced than our own, reported Dr. Yilnath. These beings have clearly mastered manipulation of exotic matter. General Morgotha's breathing had grown heavy with concern.
How many ships? Conservative estimate?
800 large vessels and approximately 3,000 smaller craft, Sarah replied.
But those numbers might be low. Our sensors may not be detecting everything.
Bob studied the data with the patient attention he had once devoted to his garden.
Have they attempted any communication? None so far.
They appear to be conducting systematic scans of our outer systems, but they haven't responded to our standard greeting protocols. Behavior patterns, asked Zethkar.
Military reconnaissance, Sarah answered without hesitation.
They're mapping our defenses, cataloging our capabilities, and assessing our response times. The assembled commanders absorbed this information with the grim understanding that their worst fears were being realized. The unknown visitors were not explorers or traders, they were conquerors.
Alliance military status? Morgoth inquired.
47,000 ships combat-ready across all sectors, Sarah reported. Another 12,000 vessels in various stages of construction or upgrade. Our defensive positions are as strong as we can make them.
Against 800 ships?
Dr. Yilnath seemed skeptical.
Against 800 ships with unknown capabilities, Bob corrected. Numbers don't always determine outcomes.
But we need more information before we can make strategic decisions. The breakthrough came 3 days later when the Alliance's most advanced sensor array finally penetrated the newcomer's stealth technology. What they discovered changed everything. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Theclon announced, we've identified the ship configurations. Cross-referencing with archaeological databases from abandoned worlds. The main display shifted to show historical records alongside current sensor data. The match was unmistakable.
The Devourers, whispered Dr. Yilnath. I thought they were myth. Who are the Devourers? Sarah asked, though she suspected she wouldn't like the answer.
Zethkar's 4 eyes were fixed on the display. According to galactic legend, they are the reason for the 1,000-year cycles of destruction. A nomadic species that consumes entire civilizations, leaving nothing but empty worlds in their wake.
Legend?
Perhaps not legend after all, Bob said quietly.
The archaeological evidence is quite clear.
These ship designs appear in ruins across the galaxy, always associated with periods of mass extinction. General Morgoth stood from his chair, his massive form radiating determination.
Then, we fight them. The alliance was formed for exactly this purpose. With respect, General, Dr. Yill_Neth interjected, if these beings have destroyed civilizations for millennia, what makes us think we can succeed where others failed? Bob activated a different display, showing the current state of alliance cooperation. Because those previous civilizations fought alone.
Each species tried to defend itself individually, making them easy prey for a coordinated enemy.
We're not fighting alone.
Additionally, Sarah added, we have advantages those previous civilizations lacked. Integrated technology from multiple species, coordinated command structure, and advance warning of their approach. Most importantly, Zethkar said with conviction, we have humanity's strategic doctrine.
The Devourers expect to face divided, panicked enemies.
Instead, they will face a unified force that has been preparing for this moment for centuries.
The war councils that followed were intense and exhaustive. Every aspect of Alliance doctrine was reviewed and refined.
Supply lines were optimized, communication protocols were tested, and contingency plans were developed for dozens of possible scenarios. But the most important discussions happened in smaller groups, where commanders could speak honestly about their fears and doubts.
Bob, Sarah said during one such private meeting, are you sure we're ready for this?
The retired admiral looked out at the stars through the station's viewport.
Sarah, no one is ever ready for war.
The best you can do is be as prepared as possible and trust in the people fighting beside you. The casualty estimates are staggering.
Yes, they are. But the alternative is extinction.
Sometimes the choice is between terrible losses and total defeat. General Morgoth joined their conversation, his presence filling the small observation lounge.
Admiral Johnson, I must confess something that has troubled me for years.
What's that, General?
When we first encountered humanity's military capabilities, I was terrified. Not just of your weapons, but of what you might become.
History shows that powerful species eventually become conquerors.
Bob nodded. It's a reasonable fear.
But, in 5 years of alliance cooperation, humanity has never sought to dominate. You have shared technology, provided protection, and treated all species as equals.
Why? Because conquest is easy, General.
Any species with sufficient military power can conquer others.
But building something together? Creating a civilization based on mutual respect and cooperation?
That's much harder and much more rewarding.
Even facing extinction, you maintain this philosophy? Especially facing extinction.
If we survive this war by becoming like the Devourers, then we haven't really won.
We'll have just replaced one monster with another.
Dr. Yill_Neth had been quietly listening to their conversation. The Etherian archives contain prophecies about a time when the Star Devourers would return. But the prophecies also speak of a great alliance that would finally break the cycle of destruction.
Do you believe in prophecies, Doctor? Sarah asked.
I believe in the power of cooperation to achieve what individuals cannot. Whether that's prophecy or just practical wisdom, I'm not sure it matters. The first contact attempt came 60 days before the projected arrival of the Devourer fleet. Alliance long-range communication specialists had been trying various methods to establish dialogue with the approaching ships, with no success until a breakthrough came from an unexpected source.
Admiral, announced communications specialist Velnara of the Caith, we've achieved contact using harmonic resonance patterns. The Devourers are responding. The main display activated, showing a creature unlike anything in the Alliance databases.
The being appeared to be composed of shifting darkness held together by some kind of energy matrix. Its voice, when it came, was like the sound of dying stars. Inferior species, it intoned, you will submit or be consumed.
This galaxy belongs to us by right of conquest. Bob stepped forward calmly. I'm Admiral Johnson, speaking for the Galactic Defense Alliance. We seek peaceful coexistence.
Perhaps we can find terms that benefit both our peoples. The Devourer's form shifted with what might have been amusement.
You offer negotiation?
Previous species have made similar offers. Their worlds now feed our ships. Perhaps previous species didn't have what we have to offer.
Which is? The choice to leave this galaxy and find uninhabited regions to colonize.
We will not submit, but we also don't wish unnecessary destruction. The silence that followed was profound. You threaten us, the Devourer finally asked.
We inform you. The Alliance represents over 40 species working in perfect coordination.
We have had centuries to prepare for your arrival.
You will find us to be unlike any enemy you have previously encountered. Numbers mean nothing.
We have consumed civilizations with millions of ships.
Yes, Bob agreed, but those civilizations were fighting separately. We fight as one.
The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the Alliance command to contemplate their options.
Well, Zethkar observed, diplomacy appears to have failed. Not failed, Bob corrected. We've gathered intelligence. They're overconfident, they underestimate cooperation, and they expect easy victory based on past experience. Those are advantages? Sarah asked.
They are if we use them properly.
The final preparations took on desperate urgency as the Devourer fleet approached.
But something unexpected was happening throughout Alliance space.
Instead of panic or despair, a new sense of unity was emerging.
On Crothery worlds, traditionally solitary warriors trained alongside Etherian pacifists.
Kaith crystal singers harmonized with Velnari tactical computers.
Species that had barely cooperated 5 years ago were now working together like parts of a single organism.
This is what we've built, Sarah realized as she watched mixed-species crews running combat drills with perfect coordination. Not just a military alliance, but a new kind of civilization.
The Devourers expect to find the same divided, frightened civilizations they've always consumed, Admiral Zethkar observed.
Instead, they'll find something that has never existed before in galactic history. A truly unified defense, General Morgoth added.
43 species fighting with one mind and one purpose. Bob smiled with quiet satisfaction. The Devourers are about to learn that evolution doesn't just apply to individuals.
Civilizations can evolve too.
As the enemy fleet crossed into Alliance space, every ship, every station, every world stood ready.
The 1,000-year cycle of destruction was about to meet its end.
Not through conquest or submission, but through the revolutionary idea that different species could become stronger together than they had ever been apart.
The final battle for galactic civilization was about to begin.